in the general election.
And WGN's Dana Revick is joining us now with our recap tonight. Dana.
That's right. Well, this hour-long debate covered a range of topics from crime and the economy to abortion, education, and COVID-19. The three Republican candidates squaring off while across town, one of their rivals took the stage at a different forum.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us.
Facing off tonight in WGN Studio 1, downstate Senator Darren Bailey, businessman Gary Rabine, and venture capitalist Jesse Sullivan. Absent from the group, a candidate considered a frontrunner.
Well, it's actually a shame that Richard Irvin chose not to be here tonight, because I was actually looking forward to having a conversation with him face to face.
Unfortunately, my opponents didn't show. Hopefully, they will show on the stage the next time we meet.
Irvin declining WGN's invitation, instead agreeing to a debate at WMAQ with attorney Max Solomon and former state senator Paul Schimpf.
We need to make sure that we support our police and we support our neighbors and our families and our friends and these school children, that we don't allow weapons to get into the hands of criminals and those with mental illnesses.
Similar topics addressed at both forums. The mass shooting at an elementary school in Texas today, then turning to crime.
Let's think about Chicago, a crime-ridden, corrupt, dysfunctional hellhole. And no one knows that better than the friends and the people that live in Chicago. Something's wrong.
We need to fill every single police vacancy. We need to repeal any bill like this anti-police bill that coddles criminals and treats them like they are victims. We need to surge the National Guard and treat this like the crisis that it is.
We do need a state's attorney that's actually going to hold people accountable. I mean, and again, the recall option should be something legislative that should be pushed.
The conversation then moved to the economy and taxes.
As governor, I'm always going to look to balance this state's budget. I will never agree to raising taxes, but what I will do is work to cut waste, cut duplication of services, and grow our economy.
We do not have a revenue problem in the state of Illinois. We have a spending problem. We need to cut down on that spending, not bringing a scalpel but an axe.
Another topic on voters' minds in Illinois, the potential Supreme Court reversal of Roe v. Wade and where these candidates stand on abortion.
J.B. Pritzker thought it was acceptable to sign into law legislation that allowed a teenager 13, 14, 15 to walk into an abortion clinic and get abortion without their parent being notified. That's abhorrent.
And we're asking church, civic, religious groups to come alongside and offer options that the pregnant woman may not know or be aware exists.
And when you have J.B. Pritzker and Lori Lightfoot celebrating the fact that we will be an oasis for abortions and that taxpayer funding, our taxpayer dollars, are going to go towards these abortions from the entire Midwest, the Midwestern capital for abortions, then that is wrong.
And we are getting reaction to tonight's debates from Governor J.B. Pritzker's campaign. A spokeswoman says tonight's first forum was more of the same from the GOP candidates who have become all too comfortable with filibustering, ducking, and dodging tough questions. No candidate outlined a vision for Illinois that would improve the lives of working families. Instead, every candidate tried to legitimize the January 6th insurrection, espoused aggressive anti-choice views, and obfuscated the truth about their records. The refusal to be honest with voters should be disqualifying, and not one of these candidates is fit to lead the state. Again, the primary election on June 28th, early voting underway, and coming up at 10 o'clock, the candidates' responses to questions about the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll also have some reaction to some post-debate interviews we did. We did ask Darren Bailey if he wanted to clarify that Chicago being a hellhole comment. So
yeah, we'll have to have a little bit more about that too.
Yeah, that was quite a firecracker soundbite there.
To sum up, we'll see you again at 10. So clearly we've got a lot to unpack in tonight's debate.
So joining us now with more insight is WGN political analyst Paul Lisnek. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you. Kudos to you, by the way, and Taman for doing a great job with the debate tonight. And the follow-up, so important.
Yes, so important. Who won tonight's debate, do you think?
Well, each of the candidates would probably say they did, but I think the way I look at it is there are certain candidates that we see on air in television ads. One we see a little bit, but I think that Jesse Sullivan did himself good tonight. He presented himself a family man, strong values, but also as the business person who talked about spending money in the proper way. So I think he really clarified who he is, good eye contact with the camera and that kind of thing. Darren Bailey, we know a little more about him because we see him a little bit more. But I think, but with some slips that might have been there, we'll probably talk about. But I think Jesse Sullivan probably goes home tonight feeling the happiest.
Dana Revick just brought it up. Let's listen to what Darren Bailey had to say when I asked him about crime.
Let's hear it again.
Yeah.
And let's focus on the city of Chicago a minute. Let's just call it like it is. Let's think about Chicago, a crime-ridden, corrupt, dysfunctional hellhole. And no one knows that better than the friends and the people that live in Chicago. So as a governor, when the riots were taking place, I would have been there in person. And the Illinois National Guard and the state police would have been with me.
And then I asked him, did you just call Chicago a hellhole?
I congratulated you on the follow-ups because that was critical. You know, I have a feeling that when he said it, he may have, wished he hadn't said it. And of course, if you're like me, watch all these debates, my mind went back to, of course, in the Trump days, the notion of the S-hole countries that we heard about. I'm not saying that's what he meant about that. But, the thing is, if you live in the city of Chicago, then people generally feel, look, yes, maybe there's a lot of crime and there's corruption, but it's our crime-ridden, corrupt city. And so what we want to hear is a love for this city. Darren Bailey comes from downstate. His polling, according to our WGN Emerson College poll, he's doing better downstate than he does in the city. That quote may have been part of the reason why and may enhance that tonight.
Dana showed us how abortion was a big topic here. Rabine kind of paints himself as a blue-collar CEO. Here's what he had to say about Roe versus Wade.
Our son Nick, we adopted at 2.5 years old. His mother decided to have him through some really tough situations. He was born less than 2 pounds. I think that's one method is funding ultrasounds and better care of these mothers, as well as jobs. I'm confident that we should have programs to mentor young women and their boyfriends or husbands.
Against any exceptions?
Yeah, risk of the life of the mother is what I believe.
So there he is sort of talking about the sanctity of life and under what circumstances abortion could be allowable. What was your
and here we had both our anchors, Micah, pushing the fact that, but what are the exceptions? Are there any? Because again, regardless of people's views sort of nationwide, Illinois, of course, there are people who feel both ways, but in the city, there's more people who believe in abortion rights. The bottom line is, you heard what I think Gary Rabine did well here was you heard a personal story. You heard about an adopted kid and his family, and so that's why they make the decisions they make, and I think you have to respect that. In the end, his only exception is for the life of the mother. We heard the only person who sort of respected, if you will, all 3 of the exceptions we know about was Jesse Sullivan, which surprised me a bit, since he seems to be one of the most religious of all of them up there. But for Rabine, he's the businessman, but we also get family very important. He also got into critical race theory at some point, talking about the fact that everybody at his table, he's got, a black and Hispanic and just all these folks at his table, so I certainly understand that. The problem is, and you pushed him on this, Micah, you asked everybody for their definition of critical race theory. I'll simply make the point, none of them define critical race theory.
Listen to what Sullivan had to say about the violence.
When you remove God from our society, these are the types of things that happen. And the Democrats always want to talk immediately about gun control and limiting our Second Amendment rights. But that is not we have the strictest gun laws in the nation here in Chicago. And what is that doing for us? Some of the root causes are getting back to fatherhood and promoting the family in our society again.
What happened to the separation of church and state?
Well, a lot of these folks sort of bridge that gap there, if you will, talking about the connection with church and state. And you're right to say that. Like it or not, but there's meant to be a separation. That's what our Constitution is written about. That's what things are supposed to happen. What I think that Sullivan did well there was the notion of, again, bringing in his personal values to all of this and talking about that. But at the same time, with the reference to God and removing God from our system. But at the same time, he goes on to make the point, even though Rabine could have said the same thing, that he's an outsider, that I'm not part of government. So what he offers people is, if you're not looking for somebody who's been tied to the government, I'm the guy you want to talk to. I'm outside the government. And again, so is Rabine, but Jesse Sullivan made a bigger deal about that.
Who will go on to face J.B. Pritzker?
We'll know June 28th which of these candidates is going to make it.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.